Good evening. Welcome to the September 25th meeting. We'll begin with the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This evening we're going to begin with a special session picking up on a conversation from last week and then moving into a board resolution, and then we'll go into our more regularly scheduled work session.
Mayor, I'll start with the roll. Trustee Bazemore?
Present.
Trustee Herrera?
Present.
Trustee Quezada?
Present.
And Mayor Garrity.
Present.
As the mayor indicated, the first thing we have on is a resolution. First of all, is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak on Resolution A, resolution adopting the 5-year plan for the Village of Ossining Public Housing Agency? Not hearing anyone, I will read the resolution. Whereas on September 18, 2019 at 7:30 p.m. at the Birdsall Fagan Police Court Facility, 86-88 Spring Street, the Village of Ossining Board of Trustees held a public hearing to receive public comments on the Housing Choice Voucher Program, Section 8, 5-year plan effective January 1, 2020. And whereas prior to the public hearing, notice of the public hearing was published in the Gazette on August 15, 2019, which publication was preceded on July 25, 2019, with the publication in the Gazette that the 5-year plan would be available for review effective July 25, 2019 at 16 Croton Avenue, the Ossining Public Library, and the Community Center. And whereas the public hearing was closed on September 18, 2019, now therefore be it resolved that the Village of Ossining Board of Trustees adopts the 5-year plan effective January 1, 2020 through December 31, 2024, and directs that all necessary documents be filed, including this resolution, acknowledging the adoption of the 5-year plan. Do I have a motion?
So move. Second.
All right. Now I think we wanted to have some conversation, and I was just looking to see if I'd gotten an email. Was there an exchange of further conversation based on what Trustee Bazemore had asked
I
about
think
last week?
that we have Marilyn Geraldo here tonight, and I know that she was in contact. I got an email from Trustee Bazemore, which I sent to Marilyn, and I believe the two of them have been in contact.
Well, I look forward to hearing about it. Welcome, Marilyn. I'm not sure that Marilyn's microphone is on. There we go.
There you go.
Good evening all. I'm just going to go a brief explanation of what we do in the program, so probably trustees to understand better, and from there we'll take any other questions on any other thing that you have. The Housing Choice Voucher Program is part of the Federal Housing Act and is operated by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development through the Village of Ossining. The program provides subsidy based on a formula which calculates the housing assistance payment and the tenant share. To qualify for a voucher, applicants must be within the household income levels established by HUD based on family size. Our office here in the Village of Ossining has adopted occupancy standards that provides for each veteran to be occupied of a maximum of 2 persons whenever possible to avoid overcrowding. The Housing Quality Standards Inspection is an informal and relatively brief inspection of the dwelling unit to ensure that the unit is adequate and meets the family needs. The Village of Ossining payment standards are in a higher payment standard over 110% of the fair market rent to maximize voucher holders' opportunity of decent and affordable units. Please note that this is a small federal assistance program that must follow strict guidelines for 254 tenant-based voucher. Our mission is to service applicants who are resident or currently employed in the Village of Ossining, single person who are 62 or older, or person with disability. We don't ask them any question what kind of disability they have or any special needs. We keep all of that confidential. Applicants are served on a first come, first service basis, taking into consideration all of the above preferences and not a specific racial, ethnicity, group, or disability. Therefore, we are unable to facilitate some of your requests due to the fact that this office does not have access to the information or certain information is considered confidential. We do not keep records of homeless population, people affected by HIV/AIDS, hunger, or substance abusers. We do assist families affected by domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking, housing discrimination, seniors, veterans, and etc. That information you can find more in the PHA plan on the page 5. just to give you an idea, for the last 5 years, we have 154 new participants to the program. And just to give you some statistic for your information, we issue the one-bedroom vouchers. We issue 77 vouchers, which a total of 35 lease up, which is a 45%. The two-bedroom vouchers, we issue 62, and 39 lease up, which is a 63%. The three-bedroom vouchers, we issue 12, and only 6 lease up, which makes a 50%. And the four-bedroom voucher, we issue 3, and only 2 lease up, which makes a 65%. Currently, on the 254 vouchers that we manage in the office, studios, we have only 4 people, which is a 2% of the voucher holder. On the one bedroom, we have 76 family, which is 30% of the vouchers. And the two bedroom, we have 133 family, which is 52% of the vouchers. On the three bedrooms, we have 38 family, which is 15% of the vouchers. On the four bedroom, we have only 2 family, which is 1%. And on the 5 bedroom, we only have 1 family, which is less than 1%. We do acknowledge that the 3 and plus bedroom vouchers are the most difficult family. They have difficulty finding large units, and that could be possible because we don't have many availables. Some records of housing discrimination, we don't keep that in-house. WRO or the Fair Housing Equal Opportunity from HUD, they're the one who in charge with those. We do refer all applicants and all participants are referred. If they are going through any discrimination in housing, they are referred to other agency and they really take it from there. We don't get the information back whether they actually end up with a lawsuit or anything like that. And if they do, I did know that this year something happened. I was called and I was told we can't say anything about it. So if you want more information with the housing discrimination, you really have to contact WRO directly. And that might be able to give you a tally of how many people complain and how many were proceed to further actions or anything like that.
Okay. So to give some context to Ms. Geraldo's response, having looked at some of the larger communities' 5-year plans, what I realized is that there was a coordination between the building and planning department and of course for the larger communities that actually have public housing authorities. And so one of the things that some of the larger communities do is that they of course they have a couple of listening sessions from those who are of low income and of using such of those services. They look to collect a certain amount of data, in the data that's readily available. Things like the U.S. Census data, things like the American the ACS that's updated every 5 years. They've looked at looking at just the overall conditions of housing, whether it be like the outside of the housing as far as sidewalks or whatever the case may be like that. I wasn't looking for something of that size for Ossining. So the thing that I was interested in knowing is, again, if we have, for example, there are 100 interviews that happen each year. Out of the 100, there are about 50 people who actually qualify for the voucher. Out of the 50, only 20 actually find some units. So my question is what do we know about these particular applicants? Now I know that there are at least two women who have gone to WRO who happen to be African American, who have had to sue property owners for violating the Westchester County law of source of discrimination, right? But if we know that that some of the particularly the 3 bedrooms and up are having an issue of finding a apartment, and we also know that the majority of our persons on Section 8 are of African Americans and of Hispanic descent, then what kind of information? My process, my thought is that we should have some kind of data on that. And so if, again, not looking for something, this could be just an informal survey, whatever the case, voluntary at base, right? But if we know that people of Black and brown people are having an issue finding housing here in the village of Ossining. That is something that needs to be known because, again, these programs are about furthering, fair and equitable housing. The Fair Housing Act says that there's no discrimination of housing. If we don't have this information or we're not asking the right questions and looking at some of the data, then each year what we're doing is we are just doing business as usual, going through the lease-up process, but we're coming into contact with people. And I'm saying that, again, I'm not thinking that the Section 8 department itself will be doing this, some of it they can do, maybe if it's an involuntary survey, but with some of the data and some of the coordinations between departments, if it's in the plan, then it'll actually be done.
So I want to respond to that because there may be some issues, and Mr. Aldo can speak to this more definitively. In this program, there's no discrimination based on race or ethnicity. So when you start asking those questions, even though the data can be valuable, we have to also be careful that that could also be perceived as being discriminatory in nature. So I think the best way to address this is actually having WRO come in to really be able to make sure that whatever we do to collect data, that we're doing it in a way that complies with fair housing regulations. Because in a federal program, that in this particular construct, that might present other challenges that aren't intended. But I think it's something that we could address by finding out more about it through WRO.
Okay.
I'm familiar with WRO, but I'm not familiar with their role when it comes to this function with the village. Do we contract with them, or are they just a resource generally you direct people to?
They're a resource. They're Westchester's only fair housing organization, so they really are the arbiters of fair housing. So any housing issue, they have legal staff, they have, they'll be able to help. And I think that on the issue of how we deal with specific populations and whether there's discrimination within that population, that's what they do. They investigate those type of cases. If somebody claims that it's any violation based on protected class, whether it's race, family size, or anything, they'll usually do an investigation based on that. That's something that they do. We don't have to contract with it. They're funded to do that work.
If I have any knowledge, someone calls me or anything like that, I just immediately refer them. I don't know what is the background, whether it's Section 8 or not. We just, okay, if this is what happened, contact WRO, and they will handle everything.
So I do want to reiterate: is not just about the blatant cases of discrimination. I was also looking for to understand, what is the population that we're serving in the Section 8 program, right? What is the if we have 20 people who are leaving the program, what are the general demographics on that? Because if you look at the plan, there's a whole paragraph about self-sufficiency and all this kind of stuff. And so then my question is, what is the Section 8 office actually doing to help people become more self-sufficiency, or is it just language that we have in this particular plan that is there? So if in the case that we know, again, I'm not looking for individuals, individual cases, but if there's some aggregate data that we can pull from the stuff you're collecting, then I would hope that the village is doing it. If you're saying that it's above you, and that the village would have to reach out to the regional offices of New York State to get some of that data, right? Because you only deal with the 254 voucher holders here in the village, but there are more people outside of the 254 vouchers. There are different kind of vouchers out here, here in the village. There is the Westchester County voucher system. I'm just looking at a way of, how can the village be able to better have information that's already readily available, that's right here in front of our eyes? Because we've done housing needs assessments, we've done our own variations, but a good chunk of that was readily available data that was right there in front of you.
So again, I think that a really good, idea would be get to some of the experts on fair housing here to talk to us specifically about that, and then identify ways we can remediate that if that's possible. Under the construct of the program, it's a federal program, so the Section 8 program can't be altered at this municipal level in terms of priorities and addressing needs. But it is something that we should probably, and I would imagine WRO has a pretty good base of information on that, and maybe some indication of how that can be lobbied for at other levels, given the fact that this is a federal program.
Right. So, because I kind of feel like maybe I'm not being clear. So, Marilyn, when people make too much money, say there are 20 people who each year who are making so much money, what is that level? Like, what are people making at that point?
Well,
To really
income-wise,
income-wise, yes.
income-wise, I don't have the numbers here, but yes, we do have, this is made by HUD. HUD sent us in a yearly base, what are the income levels? Just for say, I don't have the numbers, but just to say, if a family of 4, the maximum is 80,000.
Mm.
I'm not saying that's the right amount, just to give you an example. Then once the family reach that amount, they pay the full amount of the rent and they become self-sufficient. They don't need the program anymore.
Okay.
Which does happen in a yearly base. We have a couple of families that move out of the program, and this is how we call new people from the waiting list.
Okay. So you have that information.
Of who makes that income
Not
levels,
of who,
I will
but-
have to
but-
look at it. Yes.
But
I had to dig
but
a lot of papers.
Right.
This is not something like, okay, let me just hit a button and it comes. I'll have to dig to see, okay, who left the program because they were making too much money.
okay.
Okay. I know this year we have about 4 or 5 families who just left the program because they were making too much income.
Okay.
But in a yearly base, we don't tally them or anything like that.
Okay. So these are the kind of things that, you know, I think the village should know, right? Like these are interesting data points, right? So when you have 100 interviews a year and only 50 qualify, what are some of the qualifying factors of why people are disqualified?
In order to make them qualify, one of them is income.
Mhm.
They had to make that income levels thresholder. They also had to do proof that they're residents here of the village of Ossining.
Mhm.
On the first preference, they had to make sure that they are under that 30% level of the income limits.
Mhm.
And on the preference 2 and 3 and below, or after that, it has to be at least 50% of the income level, and then the maximum is at 80% of the income level. So it could be someone who applied 10 years ago, but if their income wasn't the high level, they will never be called until we finish with everybody with the extreme levels.
Mm.
So
Right.
that's how we go.
Great. So what I'm saying to that is, if you have 100 people, right, and 50% don't qualify, that's because that they're not below the 30% area median income of this area. But that may also mean, right, that, they're at the 40% area median income, they're at the 50% area median income. That is data, right, that I think is valuable to know, because it's not that they don't need the program. It's not that they may not be eligible for the program, but they're not eligible for the program because they are not
Have as great a need
as a greater
Yeah.
need. So,
Thank
so
you.
those are some of the things that.
Well, I believe that is on the 5-year plan. On page 4, this is what we have here. I don't know if this is what you're looking for, which extremely low income,
Mhm.
low income, very low income.
But that doesn't. But that doesn't tell me about. This tells me about who's currently there.
Who's currently waiting for a voucher, yes.
Yes. Right. But it doesn't tell me about the people who you've interviewed, who are no longer. Because once you no longer qualify, then the process that you would have to do is to go back and to reapply.
So I actually do find this very interesting. I like having more data, and it sounds like if there were an intention to gather this data and to collect it regularly and to be able to reflect on it, that it could help us understand a better picture of what are the needs in our community more broadly, some of which might be met by Section 8, and then many of which we just don't have enough vouchers to meet all the people who truly are in need of it. Because if you're at the 50% area median income, you're still really, really struggling to be able to pay for housing in Westchester County. So those are really interesting data points, but it sounds like you don't have that data readily available at this point because you don't keep track of it in that way, because it's not a way that we've ever analyzed the information. So I do like the idea of having a conversation about fair housing practices and how we might potentially collect some of this data that is in front of us that's not currently being collected in that manner, that could help us understand better what the needs are in the village. It's not going to be in this report, though. So I think for now we should look at having this conversation in a future work session and passing this resolution, and then moving back onto our work session, unless there's something else that
Nope.
we haven't
I
clarified.
feel that I've clarified.
Very good. Alrighty, we have a motion on the table and a second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Do we have a motion to adjourn the special session and go into work session?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we're going to get to some really interesting items on our agenda, but first we have. Does anybody have announcements for this week?
Yes.
Good. Sure.
Good evening. So, two announcements. So, got confirmation as per the mayor through some weeks of coordination. Lucia Herman, which is the Westchester and Rockland representative for the ACLU, I'm happy to say will be here on October 23rd. She was invited by myself and Quantel Bazemore to talk about a couple of items, and particularly to hit on best practices when it comes to police disentanglement with ICE. So that's going to be on October 23rd, and I'll reach out to see how we can get some interpreters and really see how the board can really make the best out of, how we can make the best out of that meeting, and how we could get the most information in our role as trustees and police commissioners, but also in the community as far as best practices from an organization that really is known to be quite the organization to lead and do that. I've been about 2 weeks behind in the Did You Know regarding the housing justice platform that passed a couple of months ago in New York State. So they're back on board now. Did you know that landlords must now follow these timelines in order to terminate a tenancy or increase rent? So if you're a tenant 1 year or less, 30 days, a tenant 1 to 2 years, 60 days, a tenant 3 or more years, it's 90 days. But still currently now in the village, county, state, tenants can still terminate tenancy with 1 month notice. So I know that the Landlord Tenant Council is doing their own rendition of educating the community about what those laws mean. And I'll continue to do it in this platform, mainly for tenant advocacy and how to actually enforce them and understand them. So if anyone has any questions on that, please let me know. Thank you.
Other announcements? Could somebody remind me? I'm glad you brought that up. The Landlord Tenant Relations Council meeting is at the library. Does anybody?
It's on October 10th? Was it this?
Is it really? Because that's our board meeting night.
I thought you said
Yeah,
I thought it was the 29th of October.
It is. It's the 29th.
Yes, it's 29.
Okay, so yes, October 29th
Yep,
at the
7
Ossining Library at 7 o'clock
PM. Yep.
is the Landlord Tenant Relations Council meeting. It's a public session for information session that Trustee Herrera was just referencing. Okay. Well, I have a number of announcements. I'll try and get through them relatively quickly so we can move on to our fun-filled agenda here. First, I'll update folks on a meeting that I went to today in Peekskill. It was the Mid-Hudson Regional Economic Development Council meeting. They meet every so often in various locations in the Mid-Hudson region, and this one was fairly conveniently located because they actually cover 7 counties, so sometimes it's a bit of a schlep. But this one was in Peekskill for good reason, because they were just the winners of the DRI. So it was an opportunity to see Mayor Rainey, and he gave pretty much the same presentation that he gave to the REDC committee that won him the $10 million. So I got to see that, and I took a lot of notes, and it was very interesting. It was lovely to see him, even though I can't say I'm happy for him, but I did say congratulations in person for the first time. So it was a good meeting on another front, though, because the Regional Economic Development Council is part of the scoring process for the consolidated funding applications. And the village put in 3 applications this year, and they've started giving us little kernels of information about how that evaluation process is going. So it's 100 points that you are scored on, 20 of which is the recommendation from the Regional Economic Development Council. If you get a perfect 20, you are considered a priority project. There are people in this room who've been involved in priority projects before. Being a priority project does not mean that you will get the award. We have been a priority project before. We did not get the award in the past because that other 80 points is the technical end, and the particular agency or department in state government will then go through the rest of the application and see how many boxes you check in if you're going to be able to access the funds that year. But I'm very pleased to say, with the information we have so far, one of our projects, the Indian Brook Water Treatment Facility, has been identified as a priority project. So we've got 20 out of 100. We'll see what happens with the other 80 points. Next week, October 1st, they're going to put out a list of the next level, the 15-point scores, which is regionally significant projects. So then now you're starting with a 95. So you got the first 15 points, and then we'll see about those other 80 points. So we could get all of our applications filled, and that would be lovely. But right now we know one of them is on a good path, and we'll see about the other two, and we'll learn about the actual awards probably in December. Okay, also you may have noticed if you've been driving down Walden Road behind the high school that they have begun preparation for the paving. We're going to be concluding our 2019 paving season this year with that stretch of Walden Road from Ellis Place to Emmleton/Underhill. Also there will be a restoration of Croton Street. Folks who live in that neighborhood may recall not so long ago we had a major water main break, and so now we get to do road restoration as the end of our paving season. This is kind of exciting, and this is for everybody who votes or knows anybody who votes and wants to remind them. Early voting for the first time ever in New York State starts 10 days before Election Day, so October 26th. Anybody who is a registered voter in Ossining can go to the community center. I believe it will be actually in the museum room. Ironically, we will be talking about the Sing Sing Prison Museum later. There will be 3 voting booths there, and it's both weekends before the election, and there's a couple of different time frames. You can go to the Westchester Board of Elections to get more specifics, but I'll just tell you on the weekend of the 26th and 27th of October and the weekend of November 2nd and 3rd, voting will be at the community center from 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. On Monday, Wednesday, and Friday in the intervening week, that's the 28th, 30th, and 1st, you can vote from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Then Tuesday and Thursday, for some reason, they picked Halloween to be one of the dates that it's late voting. It's from 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. Then the day before Election Day, you cannot vote. The one day you cannot vote is the day before Election Day. And then go to your regular polling place on November 5th. If you didn't take advantage of early voting, go to your regular polling place on November 5th. Surely there will be kinks to work out. It is the first time New York State has undertaken anything of this magnitude. It's a major, major change in how elections are done. There will be poll workers in 17 locations in Westchester County alone. It is possible, I have not confirmed yet, if anybody else has more updated information than I do, please let me know. There are actually 17 polling locations through Westchester County. If you're an Ossining voter, you can definitely vote at the Ossining location. If the machines arrive as they are supposed to with the ability to have on-demand ballots, then if you work in White Plains, you might be able to vote at the White Plains location, but we're not sure if that's the case yet. There should be on-demand ballots. That's the plan, but we'll know for sure when the machines arrive. It's all happening right at the last minute. October 1st, take out your calendars. We got a bunch of events. October 1st is a town hall meeting at the Ossining Public Library from, Jamie, 6 to 8 p.m.? I think so, from 6 to 8 p.m. Thank you to County Legislator Catherine Borgia for organizing this with the County Planning Department. The keynote speaker that evening will be County Commissioner of Planning, Norma Drummond. She's going to be talking to us about the census. The 2020 census is incredibly important, and she is uniquely qualified to be able to explain to folks exactly how important the census is to so many aspects of your daily life. Yes, it impacts how you are represented in your congressional district, but it has much, much further reaching impact. And most recently, we talked a lot about the sales tax revenue, and we're particularly aware of that now because there was the increase. And through that process, we learned that the amount of sales tax revenue we get is determined by the 2010 census in Ossining. Now, we know we were undercounted in 2010, which means we are not getting as great a share of just that one little source of funding for our community as we should for the number of people in our community. It is incredibly important that we have a successful census. We've established the Ossining Counts Committee, which is lots of stakeholders from the community who are going to be instrumental in doing community outreach to let folks know how important it is, to let folks know how to answer the census and to answer questions for folks. And Commissioner Drummond on October 1st will be the first public community session to be able to start asking those questions.
When's the next meeting for the Ossining stakeholders for the census?
I don't think it's been scheduled.
Okay, so there hasn't been one since the last one that we had at the.
The first one we had was you mean when the U.S. Census folks
Yeah.
came? We had at the Operations Center. Since then, we've sent out emails. We have established a section of the village website as a resource. Right now, it's as much as anything, it's a clearinghouse for information. And then when I went to the Neighbors Link meeting last week, which is a lot of the same stakeholders, I gave them an update, told them about the October 1st meeting. It's really going to start gearing up. I mean, the census work. Did anybody get a census worker come to their house? I had a census worker come to my house last week. It was a little weird. So there's, they just wanted to confirm that like it was. I don't want to
So
belabor this, but no, the Austin Counts as a committee has not scheduled.
so we don't have like a actual. So do we actually have like a complete count committee?
We haven't determined the specific committee. We have like representative groups, but we haven't moved forward in an actual like steering committee now.
Okay.
Okay.
It's in progress.
Also, I will reiterate the request by our village town clerk, Mary Ann Roberts, to remind everybody that the Austin Historical Society Museum is inviting you to attend their 88th anniversary dinner and silent auction. Again, happening October 24th. It will be at the Briarcliff Manor. You cannot pay for your dinner at the door. So make your reservation in advance. You must RSVP by October 14th. And if you would like to call the Historical Society, they have a really great phone number, 914-941-0001. Okay, so Green Austining is hosting their tag sale. It's a community-wide tag sale. There are a number of homes throughout the Austining community that will be hosting tag sales that day. Go to greenaustining.org to learn where those locations are. And again, that's October 5th. You can go on the Green Austining website, find out all these locations, and just drive around and buy stuff from your neighbors all day long. This Sunday, September 29th, is the Hispanic Heritage Festival. Can anybody tell me what time it's taking place? It's down in Market Square.
12 to 6? I think it's 12 to 6.
Or was it earlier?
All right. Head on down to Market Square on Sunday. If anybody gives me a more specific time before I finish making announcements, then
That's
we'll
what
fill
we
you in.
discussed in the meeting this week.
Okay.
12 to 6.
12 to 6. All righty. Then on October 1st, so that's Tuesday, and actually kids have off from school because it's Rosh Hashanah, there is a climate march. It's being organized by a bunch of third graders. Yeah. So a group of children has decided to organize the climate march, and they came and they met with the manager's office, and they've already got their signs made up. They're going to meet at 10 a.m. on October 1st at Market Square, and they're going to march down probably on the sidewalk. So it's very family friendly. So if you have young people in your family, or if you would just like to support the young people's efforts, meet at 10 o'clock on October 1st, and you'll march down to the waterfront, and then they're going to do a cleanup down by the waterfront. So kudos to them for taking the initiative. We have a bunch of little Gretas apparently in Austining, so what could be better than that? And then also the Forest of Fears is taking place over 2 weekends in October. I think, are the tickets on sale yet?
Yes.
The tickets are on sale now online, so just look up Forest of Fears, unless there's some other secret code I need to know. It's just look up Forest of Fears.
There's a link from the web blast as well.
Excellent. And it's the Friday and Saturday, 18th and 19th, and then the 25th and 26th.
Correct.
I'm looking at you because your wife is the organizer of that, so you're just going to correct me when I'm wrong, right? Okay. So go ahead and get your tickets online for that, the weekends of the 18th and 19th and 25th and 26th. And also on October 19th is the Big Us BBQ, which is taking place at Henry Gordine Park, and that is from 12 to 6. Is there anything I've forgotten? Good, then let's move on. Madam Manager.
Okay, thank you. So we'd like to introduce our first guest tonight. It's Brent Glass, Acting Director of Sing Sing Prison Museum, for a Sing Sing Prison Museum update.
Thank you.
Welcome, Brent.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to the Board of Trustees tonight. And this is an important moment now for the Sing Sing Prison Museum. So it's very timely that we have a chance to talk about our plans I did distribute, though maybe not everyone got a copy of our brochure, which I think lays out the goals and summarizes where we're going as a museum. I would just say that our mission is to tell the story of Sing Sing Prison over the past 200 years of incarceration at Sing Sing, which is a remarkable story. But we also want to challenge visitors to reimagine the criminal justice system today and to take action to create a more just society. So we have this dual mission of history and also relevance to current issues in criminal justice. And the third goal is to have a positive impact on the economic vitality of this community. We are now a nonprofit organization. We have a board of directors. I'm pleased that two of our board members are here, Rochelle Udell and Dana White. Rochelle was principally responsible for the beautiful brochure that we're distributing this evening. And Dana, I think you know, is the village historian and has been a great source of great resource for us for the museum. We also have a charter from the New York State Board of Regents as an educational institution, and we've been working very closely with the Ossining High School and with Peekskill High School to develop a curriculum on criminal justice in the high school. We've worked with the Westchester County Libraries for a library program throughout the county. This past weekend, we had a remarkable performance, a dance performance down at the Township Park that has attracted national and even international attention, focused here on Ossining. And so we're very pleased with the response to the Weight Room, which was a dance performance that was performed down at Engle Park this weekend. We also are working with the prison in many ways with the correctional facility at Sing Sing. There's a garden project there right outside the old 1825 cell block. The men who are incarcerated there, who are in the mental health unit, have been working with a master gardener to develop a flower garden, and it's proven to be a very effective and successful activity for the men who are participating. So we're doing trying to work with local government, with the schools, with libraries, with the correctional facility, and now we're reaching a critical moment in our development. We really need the help of the village as our partner. You probably know that we are proposing to transfer ownership of the former powerhouse, the building that sits just north of the prison walls, formerly the electric power plant for the prison, transferring ownership title for that building from the state to the village. And Assemblywoman Sandy Galiff is introducing legislation that will make that transfer happen. In the meantime, and sometimes legislation can take a year or can take 2 years, in the meantime, we are proposing a lease agreement, a 5-year lease from the state to the village. And that lease has been drafted. It has been reviewed by council, by our pro bono council, and by the Department of Corrections and the Office of General Services at the state level. So what we need the village to do through a resolution, I guess, at your next board meeting, is to authorize the mayor or the manager or both of you, both mayor and manager, to sign that lease agreement, because that establishes that there is site control by the village, and that will allow us to have access to state funding that is now available through the Dormitory Authority of the state of New York. So that's really, having that lease agreement is critical. There are 2 other actions that are related to that I'm suggesting, that I'm requesting that you consider. One is to raise the level of spending authority from $1 million to $2.875 million, and that would reflect the increase in grants that we've received from the state since the last time we discussed this with you. So I think there was a resolution authorizing the expenditure of $1 million, and now we want to increase that to 2.875 million. Those are funds from the Dormitory Authority and also from the Empire State Development. And then the third action, which is related to this lease, is to authorize the village to actually go out and bid the project. We have a project management architect, preservation architect, who will be working with whoever is selected to actually build this, the first phase. And the first phase, I should say, is the stabilization and preservation of the powerhouse. So we have detailed plan specifications for roof repair, for repointing, for window replacement, and for some interior repairs that will allow us to get to the next level where we would then create some programmatic and exhibition space within the powerhouse. There's about a 2,600 square foot space formerly used as locker rooms by the correctional facility staff on the west side of the powerhouse that we will repurpose as what we're calling a preview center, a place that we will open at the end of 2020, place for visitors to come and experience some of the exhibitions and some of the programs that we will offer, but also to see what we're going to do in the future. So it's a critically important moment now for the museum. We have a lot of momentum. The national spotlight is on Ossining and on the Sing Sing Prison Museum as a result, not only of the performance last weekend, but some of the other steps we're taking. We have some very strong private support in addition to the state support. We have some major gifts that have been pledged to us. American Express has given us a $100,000 grant to create a virtual reality production in the powerhouse. We have some other gifts or grants that we are not quite ready to announce yet, but that we hope in the next week or so we can do that. So I'll stop there, and if you have any questions, I'd really like to hear them and describe to you what we plan to do. In the brochure, there is a schedule of the different phases we hope to accomplish over the next 5 or 6 years. And so by 2025, which is the 200th anniversary of the beginning of construction of the historic cell block, we will open the museum.
Yeah, I'd like to, because I know that staff has been working on some of these particular
Yes.
specific items you asked for, so I'd like to just ask Stuart to follow up on a couple of items that we might have for resolutions for next
Right.
week.
The plan, Mayor, for next week, to follow what Brent was talking about, is to have a resolution authorizing the execution of the lease. Also to put out the bid. We don't actually put the date of the bid in the
Right.
resolution, but at least essentially is in the packet, so it's there. We also have some documents we still have to provide to DASNY, the Dormitory Authority, and I have those that just have to be filled out. It's one of these long forms, but they just have to get done. So that also can be done fairly rapidly and can just get signed off on. But the author, so for next week, I would propose to present the board with 2 resolutions. One is to authorize the execution of the lease from the village's perspective, and the other one would be to allow for the issuance or to go out to bid with regard to the initial phase, which is the with regard to the as Brent said, I think the 2,600 square feet that's going to
Yes.
be that center there, and then it will not require a resolution with regard to the DASNY documents. Those are simply to fill out documents with regard to the grant. That grant money will now come through the village, which is why the village is the one that will be doing all that.
Which,
And then we also need do we need to increase the authority
well,
from
that's
$1
actually,
million
just
to-
a moment,
And that's- we
since
have
Tom is here,
Tom,
maybe you could help us on the village board understand, because we're frequently find ourselves in this position where we are partnering with relation to grants. So the request is that the construction amount be raised from 1 million to 2.875. Is that it?
Yes, that was the number.
Reflective of the increase in grants since the last time we established it at the 1 million.
Right, and this was accounted for as a capital project, and that was a resolution that was passed previously for the $1 million. Was you establish the authorizations for $1 million, and then it was offset by the, at that time it was the SAM grant for $1 million, and we would just adopt another resolution to update these amounts to the $2.875 million, as a capital project.
So would that be another resolution then to be able to increase?
That would be a
number?
third resolution that you'd need within that. That's correct.
Is it something that takes some time to prepare, or is that something reasonable to be?
I
able to do
actually did pull up the first one, and I was reading it. It needs to be updated. Things have changed. Back then, the historic Hudson River Towns was heavily involved, and now it's more the Sing Sing Prison Museum operating on their own. So, we just need to
And do we
modify,
have
update.
I'm sorry. Do we have documentation of all of the grants that make up that 2.8 million total? We have
We do.
have that already. Okay, great. Then if that can be on for next week too, then that would really help move things along, I imagine, right?
Other questions?
I think there are.
So, Stuart, the lease agreement,
Right.
we're not really paying for anything, right?
No,
Right.
this is simply, initially, the plan would be that the village wouldn't even be a lessor here, but the state insisted, and it's just that basically it'd be the village, because the key issue is that there needs to be municipal site control. So it would be, it's not that we're paying anything or anything like that. It's just a matter of the village working on that. So we've had discussions, as Brent indicated, there's pro bono counsel for Sing Sing Prison Museum. We've dealt with Office of General Services, which is technically the owner, bond counsel, which is critical, as well as Department of Correctional Services. So all of those have been involved from that side with regard to the language in the lease. A lot of it is form information that we've already gotten from corrections, particularly with regard to their security concerns in terms of, what we'll have to do during whatever construction phase goes on.
There will be a period of time where we're jointly managing that building because the Department of Corrections still maintains a repair garage there to repair their fleet, but they are planning to relocate that garage, probably within the prison footprint at some point in the future.
And even if, when the building is turned over to the village, the state has infrastructure in that building. They have steam pipes underneath. There would be an agreement with the state. They would obviously, we're not asking them to relocate all of that, and they would not do that. So it's understood already with the prison authorities that would, we may have the building, but they obviously would still have access to whatever infrastructure they need to operate, their part of the facility.
So essentially, the village doesn't have to come out of pocket for this
Right.
property.
That's correct.
Just for clarification, you talked about acknowledging the 200-year history, and then you talked about looking towards the future. Could you expound on that?
Mhm. Well, I think that one of the I guess taglines that I like to cite is that every chapter in criminal justice history in this country has a few pages written at Sing Sing, and there's not a single issue you can think of that doesn't have some connection to Sing Sing, even in the area of reform. We're going to tell that story. There's the story of capital punishment. There's the story of there was a women's prison there at Sing Sing for 40 years. There were many famous visitors, starting with Alexis de Tocqueville in the 1830s all the way through to the present. Many historic performances there. The Warner Brothers movies that were made there. So popular culture will factor in. The issue of mass incarceration today is going to be an issue that we're going to explore, and how the effect that has on our society today. In fact, this dance performance that took place at Engle Park addressed the impact on families of incarceration today. We want this to be I'm convinced, and I have worked all over the country and worked at the Smithsonian and directing the American History Museum there. I'm convinced that we have a national resource here that can be an educational resource. I've mentioned to the mayor that I think Ossining can be on the map, not for its identity as a place of incarceration, but as a place of criminal justice reform. We can put the spotlight on what Hudson Link is doing, what Rehabilitation Through the Arts is doing, and we think the museum will be part of this movement that's going on in the country now to reconsider the criminal justice system. By putting a spotlight on the history, the storytelling is really important. We believe, and I believe, that by telling the story of Sing Sing, we're going to make people aware of the fact that some of these issues have been around for a long time. And we can look at how the efforts that were made to try to reform criminal justice at Sing Sing. You have Thomas Mott Osborne, the person for whom the Osborne Association is named. He was the warden at Sing Sing and tried to establish the Mutual Welfare League, which was a form of self-government there at Sing Sing. His story could be told. You have the infamous case of the Rosenberg executions that took place at Sing Sing that had an international impact. So I think that it's a tough story. It's not a happy story, but there are little moments of enlightenment that we will put a spotlight on as well.
So I definitely understand looking at the history. Now, when you're looking at the future, like when visitors leave, what do you want them to take away? How do you want them to take that history and connect it to the present?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that we want visitors to be aware of the fact that the criminal justice system in this country is in need of reform, in need of change, and we can hold up some examples of how it is changing around the country and here in New York State. Restorative justice, for example, is becoming a much more popular form of justice. We want them to think about what is the purpose of prison, what social use does prison have today? Not just by talking about the history, but by talking about how our prison system operates today. So we want them to come away inspired to rethink the criminal justice system and to hopefully become active in promoting change. We're not going to tell them how to change. We're not going to be advocates in the sense of promoting one solution over another, but we want to let them know that there are options out there that are being pursued all over the country, all over the world. And Sing Sing is the place to tell that story. Sing Sing is internationally known. It's iconic. So we think that we're going to have a profound impact on the awareness and building a different kind of consciousness. There is a coalition now called the International Sites of Conscience that's based in New York but has members all over the world, and we propose to be part of that. I would invite our board members to say anything in response to your question, because I think that's the fundamental question: is what's the takeaway message? And when people come to museums, you can't overload them with too much information. But we think that we can present, and we're still working on this now, coming up with a master narrative of what a visitor will experience. But when they walk in that cell block, and I don't know, and I would invite members of the trustees to go into the 1825 cell block if you've never been in it. It's a very powerful experience to see that now ruin. It's now a building in ruinous condition, but it's still preserved to the point where you can imagine what it was like for 1,200 men to be living in that space. And from that point, we want to take the story forward to where we are today. And it's not going to be necessarily, as I said before, a happy story. It's a pretty brutal story in many respects. There were 614 people executed at Sing Sing over a period of about 70 years. We're going to tell that story, but capital punishment is still practiced in this country.
I just have one last question, and to whomever can answer this question. Understanding that you're going to have different thoughts and different ideas and different takeaways, will there be an idea to just abolish prisons? Like, will that be something that people will at least know that there's a possibility to actually not just think about reform, but to actually say, what does society look like if we don't actually
have.
Whether there'll be an exhibit or a program, but the option of prison abolition, I have been reading about this. It's not a new idea. It's been around for a couple of 100 years. So we will talk, and it's gaining currency now. And so those kind of discussions, we want the museum to be that platform. We will have within the powerhouse not only exhibition galleries, but there'll be a theater, classrooms, and we're devoting one floor to what we're calling an institute for criminal justice. So we can have, if the Vera Institute wants to hold a board meeting there, or the Fortune Society, or the Osborne Association, or have a training program, we want to have that space available. So those kind of options will be definitely discussed.
Thank you.
Anybody else have questions? Please.
Yes.
Mine are a little bit more like in the technical end. Maybe Stuart can help me just understand some of the technical aspects on, because you say you're going out to bid, there's some specs and stuff like that. I'm assuming there are drawings involved.
Yes.
I know you've been in front of the planning board as well. What does that mean for us in regards to, because in a way, which I'm in favor of this whole program, don't get me wrong, but regards to building permits, the review of the drawings, the inspections, could you, obviously because in a way it will be our own building, technically, by paper, but, so how does that work on, I want to sort of understand that.
Well, right now, the matter is before the planning board for a conditional use permit. The plan is that it's going to be segmented because the project's going to be taken over time.
Within phases.
Correct. And it's already been looked at by the Environmental Advisory Council for their input with regard to its being done. In terms of the way in terms of the bidding and work like that, this board previously approved a memorandum of understanding between the village and HHRT with regard specifically to the construction work that was going to be done through the construction entity that has already been doing a lot of the design work at this point. In terms of permits to be issued, one of the things, Trustee Quesada, as you recognize, initially this is still going to be the state's building. So, but there are a full set of plans. The state's aware of what those are. I don't have the direct answer for you right now in terms of building permits and things like that, but we are going for a conditional use permit at this point to be issued by the planning board. So that process is going forward. The building department is, aware of this because they've been provided with a set of the plans already in terms of what they're going to be, what they're going to have to do. And take it from there. So that review process has started in terms of what has to be done. I don't anticipate that there's a need for anything from the zoning board at this point because of the work that's anticipated at this stage. There was already an environmental review done that was done previously, and there have been no changes. So that's going to, pretty much be, readopted, I would believe, by the planning board in terms of what was done earlier. So that's that. In terms of actual permits that have to be issued and have to be obtained, and that we have to determine. The contract will be let by the village because it is the village's.
Yes.
So that's clear. So it's going to be whatever are mandatory requirements, both in terms of the actual contract documents, the front end, which has all of the sort of, if you want to call it legalistic language, that's going to be the village's front end, and that's there. Insurance requirements, anything like that. The back end, which is the actual, if you want to call it the technical specs, those have already been worked on in terms of what's going to be done, and so that's the booklet. That's ultimately going to be a book that's going to be put together. I think I may be incorrect. I may be mixing it up, and I apologize. I think some of those front ends have already been provided so that we've been able to start. We'll be able to start putting that bid together.
I mean,
and
just
do
in,
it.
in my personal, just knowledge, I guess I would like to just learn a little bit more on that, and that doesn't have to be right now. Obviously. That could be an offline
We'll be able to get that
conversation.
to you.
I just, like if you're doing, if it was the state doing this, there's no involvement of the village of Austin at all, because it will be state doing all the work. The state take care of all the stuff, just like the schools in the city, they have their own building department, they do all that stuff, and everything's internal. So because there's a little bit of a mix in here, that's the only reason why I just want to understand a little bit more and what that entails.
No, I appreciate that, and I think we understand that that we're going to be joined at the hip with the village going forward, and it's really important that these questions get addressed. I want to make sure that when the resolution to go out to bid is presented, that the scope of work is not only the 2,600 square foot powerhouse preview center, but also there's parking, there's landscaping, and also the repair of the roof, and the whole scope of work needs to just be acknowledged. So I don't want to make sure that it's limited, but I think the question is very very relevant, and we can get you the drawings and the specifications.
I just want to understand that the process, so to
Yes.
speak, the steps. I would love to see the drawings. Don't get me wrong.
Yes.
But I would love to just understand a little bit better what does that mean. Is there an application fee? Is there, obviously, it's a lot more stuff that
Yes.
That then is there a process of the review of the drawings like we usually do for big projects? We send it out for someone, a consultant, to review, make sure they comply to code. Again, this is the state. If the state is doing this, there's none of that involvement within the village. I just want to understand what does that mean for us.
The state is providing grants, but the state's
Correct.
not.
I know, no. But if it was the state, if it was
Oh,
the
if it was the
state-owned
state. Okay,
kind of
yes.
stuff, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
So, if it was the state doing this project, as a part of sometimes what they do the work within the precinct itself,
Right.
there's no involvement of the village.
Right.
So that's just
I do expect Trustee Quezada that Kellard Sessions, which has served as the village's and is serving as the village's planning consultant, I know that their intention is to review those plans. I think at the last board meeting they had not yet, but they will be looking at that. So they will provide, as they do on any project, a series of comments. So if they think that things are needed to be done, those will then go back to the engineer here, and then we'll be able to work it from that end. But the actual permitting, I'll be able to provide you with a chronology on that.
just from my understanding.
Sure.
But thank you.
And we have had it. The State Historic Preservation Officer has already reviewed those plans, and so we've gotten a sign off from that perspective.
Great. Are there other questions here? Do you have other questions or comments? No? Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, I don't have a voice. Karen in the CAD with Cornell, Sing Sing in the museum came up as a discussion in that about water resiliency and how they're dealing with that. The timing is sort of interesting. You were there, so I'm not losing my voice explaining it to the public, but
When
I
we,
think it needs to be taken into
Brent, I don't
consideration.
know if you're aware, but we had some students from Cornell.
Yes.
And then we actually, following our meeting at the Austin High School, we took a tour of the waterfront that started at the power station. So the students were obviously very interested in what was going on
Yeah.
there. And we have a lot of activity on the waterfront, as you know. So we started there, and then we actually started there, and we ended up viewing the waterfront, the DPW site, and then going all the way up Sing Sing Hill. And it was a long walk all around, and we got them to a nice place to eat afterwards.
Mhm.
And it
Good.
was So.
Well, that's we want that to happen here, and I'm convinced this is a transformative project for the village, and I hope economically it will be as well.
Oh, for sure. And the presentation I was at on Friday night of the weight room was really spectacular. So thank you.
Good.
It was a really powerful story honoring the experience of women with loved ones who are incarcerated. That was the dance performance, and I look forward to. You mentioned that maybe Jerry somebody mentioned that that type of program that really invited the public to experience a story related to incarceration in a way that is very different than how we think of the museum, is indicative of the type of programming
Yes.
that this project looks to.
And we just got a
continue.
report today from our public relations consultant, and the number of the coverage of the performance and of Ossining went all over the world. So I think it was a great moment. And it is an example of what we hope to create here, and to address the tough questions that I think this is the place to do it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty.
All right.
A change of pace coming up here.
Yes, I'd like to invite Brendan Kennedy of BST up to present the Ossining 2018 audit.
Pass out these presentations. Just pass them around here.
Sure.
I can say that having spent many years in prison, I think this is a tremendous idea. So, kidding. So we met about a month ago, where I assured you we were just a couple days short of being able to present fully at that meeting. So you've had about a month to go through all the documents. So I'm going to try and concisely go through the results. Be mindful that this audit takes us over 300 hours a year to do. So
You want to do it in an overhead or not necessarily?
no, this is fine. 300 hours plus a year to do all this audit work, and we're going to try and summarize the results in 10 or 15 minutes. So obviously this is very high level. I'm going to talk very quickly. To the extent you have any questions, I will be happy to address them. The presentation here kind of follows a similar outline to prior years. I have added a couple things that I wanted to go through, some new things here for the 2018 reporting period. Flipping past the cover, you have the table of contents. And then beyond that, just to reconfirm the scope of services, we do 3 audits for you folks. We do your financial statement audit, your federal single audit, and then a state single audit, which covers your Department of Transportation programs. The financial audit of the village has 5 opinions in it. So it's not just one opinion on the village. We're giving 5 opinions, 3 on the major funds, your general fund, I believe it's your debt service and capital, your other aggregate, and then the consolidated governmental activities, which is the village as a whole on the full accrual basis of accounting. So 5 opinions. The federal single audit is one major program. That's your Housing Choice Voucher Program, and that includes a report on controls and compliance. As mentioned, the state single audit covers your DOT programs. When you have $750,000 in federal funds and $100,000 in state DOT, it triggers the state DOT requirement. And so we've issued a report on that. Finally, you have your financial report on internal controls and compliance in accordance with government auditing standards. That's just a report. Executive summary on page 4, unmodified opinions on each opinion unit. An unmodified opinion is the highest level of assurance that we can give you that the financial statements are free of error. We also give an in relation to on your supplementary information. There's quite a bit of extra information we present above and beyond the minimum requirements in our basic financial statements. The next couple items are pretty impressive in my book. No recorded audit adjustments and no unrecorded adjustments. So that means the financial information that's supplied by Tom and Dale and the group there, we didn't have to make any adjustments to that information in the conduct of our audit. So that's not something you see very often. Obviously, when there's no adjustments, very rarely would you then have a control deficiency. So we have no control deficiencies over financial reporting that we would present to you. And just one small comment here about the PO usage. We noted just consistent with the past year. It's a little inconsistent, but again, we don't consider that to be a control deficiency, but more of an operational matter for you folks. Go ahead.
When you say PO?
Purchase orders.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. The federal single audit, the Housing Choice Voucher Program. That's your big program. I don't think we had any other federal dollars come through during the 2018 reporting period. The total expenditures were relatively consistent with the prior year. Just in general, I have to give Marilyn a little credit. The records that she keeps are in tremendous condition so that when we do the single audit steps, and they're very prescriptive, there's really no subjectivity to what we're testing. Everything is lined up nicely. So it allows us to do the federal single audit in an efficient manner. So no controls, deficiencies as it relates to the federal single audit compliance, and an unmodified opinion or clean opinion as it relates to that program when complying with federal law. The state DOT on page 6 here. This is a relatively easy program to audit because it really only consists of 2 invoices. Those invoices are audited as part of our substandard procedures. You submit the documentation for reimbursement, and we issue a separate report over that. No issues as it relates to your state DOT single audit on page 6. Areas of focus. These are all relatively consistent. The only new item that I added to this was the last item. You had a major accounting standard that was implemented. This was implemented by all municipalities with a 12/31 year-end reporting period. We'll talk a little bit about that, but the other areas I'll point out, we do consider fraud in the conduct of our audit and design audit procedures to identify what might be material instances of fraud. We look at journal entries, we look at out-of-sequence checks, and we try and alter our procedures on a year-to-year basis just to give an element of unpredictability. No matters that we would report to you as a result of those procedures this evening.
I'm sorry, when you say the word fraud, it makes me nervous. So what you're saying is you did not find any evidence of fraud?
No.
Okay, just wanted to clarify. Okay.
No. We have a professional responsibility to consider it in the conduct of our audit. Just saying we did that by looking at those things, trying to look at different things on an annual basis, alter our procedures just to give an element of unpredictability in the conduct of our audit, and nothing came to our attention.
You tried really hard to trick us, and we couldn't be tricked because everything was as it should be. Is that what you're saying?
We do try and trick you. One of these years, I'm gonna get Dale and Tom, but it's just not this year. So, all right. Page 8, I won't get into any details. This is all relatively consistent information with the prior period. We look at a sample of the vouchers and the participants. We evaluate their eligibility. We go through the program costs. We do the special tests and provisions. It's pretty comprehensive. And again, these are prescriptive. These are not things that BSD decides to test. These are things that the federal government tells us to test. And we did not identify any issues when going through these procedures on our sample. The state single audit we've already talked about. I'm going to skip that. Let's talk about a bummer. And this bummer on page 10 is just an accounting standard, okay? So all municipalities, this isn't a village issue, this is a municipal-wide issue, in particular the state of New York, so I need to put it into context as to why it impacts us more so than maybe outside of New York State. In New York State, we have 2 kinds of major pensions. We have our retirement and police. That is about 95% funded. That is entirely managed by the state of New York. They send us a bill, we cut them a check, and it works perfectly. The second major benefit we provide to retirees is health insurance. In New York State, there is no mechanism to fund post-retirement health. This is not a new concept. This has been around forever. We simply pay for it on a pay-as-you-go basis. So as our retirees incur health insurance, we pay those bills and we budget for it on an annual basis. This accounting standard is an update to GASB 45, and it simply handles how we report and disclose our obligations associated with retiree health. Okay? It standardizes the estimation process. It gives a fixed discount rate, the 20-year GO high grade bond index, and it takes some of the subjectivity out of the estimation process. It does not impact the general fund or your governmental funds. Okay? There's no impact from a budgeting perspective or an operational perspective either. This is simply an accounting standard, and it impacts our government-wide, which is our full accrual basis. So as you can see here, to comply with this standard, we make a relatively significant adjustment to net position. And if you were to look at this kind of adjustment across all municipalities in New York, you would see the same kind of decimation of your net position where you put the entire obligation on an actuarial basis of the post-retirement health on your balance sheet. That's what the adjustment is. Doesn't change anything operationally, doesn't mean you have to do anything differently. It's simply a number that sits on the balance sheet. Now, I can also tell you, and we touched about this last year, from a bond rater perspective, I wouldn't expect this to have any kind of impact because this is a long-term obligation, and they're also aware of it. Although we're putting this on the balance sheet now, this number was disclosed in our required supplementary information already. So they're aware of this number. It should be of no surprise to the bond rating community. So from that perspective, it is truly an accounting nuance that we're following to comply with US GAAP.
Thank you for explaining that.
Sure.
I've actually just out of curiosity, is there a reason that GAAP decided that this was important to display?
There's been focus more and more on longer term liabilities in the financial statements. Governments are traditionally, and I'm speaking broadly, they're shorter term financial thinkers. You pass an annual budget, you stick to the budget, you comply with the budget, then there's the next year. And so I think some of these accounting standards are trying to show people across the board what's going on in this government in a long-term basis. And the problem with health insurance, and this is a national issue, is that health insurance costs went like this, and everything else kind of increased steadily. So when you're projecting that liability on a long-term basis, assuming the same kinds of spikes, the number just went bananas. And that's, and like I said, it's truly going to be more of a national solution, I think. There's just, at some point, the cost of healthcare is going to eclipse, it'll be the largest component of GDP. I mean, actuaries and finance people are at some point, it has to level off. It just has to, otherwise we'll all go bankrupt. But I think that's is to put into perspective the long-term liabilities associated with this.
Introducing a much more interesting and
Yes.
political topic that could
Medicare
take
for
the rest of the
all.
night. But
Yep. Hey, so moving on, I just wanted a 1-minute accounting lesson on page 11. Your government-wide, there's really two looks at the village in these financial statements. The long-term look, which is your governmental activities, and then more of a current snapshot, which is the fund statements. And traditionally, we focus on the funds. And so all this dialogue has been about the long-term component of your financial statements. And that's what the full accrual is. Again, no impact on the water fund, no impact on the general fund. And we'll talk about the financial condition of those funds, which is tremendous in a little bit. But it just explains the different bases here on page 11. And all this information is disclosed in the footnotes as well. If you were to look at your financial position on a long-term basis, this is aggregated, full accrual, all long-term assets, liabilities, depreciation, everything. We lost about $3.9 million. That doesn't mean we didn't miss a budget. All of our budgets were compliant. We complied with New York State law. Again, this is just a long-term look of the village. Of that $3.9 million loss, 1.7 is depreciation. That's something we don't talk about in the funds whatsoever. That's the amortization of your long-term assets over a period of time, akin to what a business would do. And then I already mentioned the OPEB costs, and we have pension out there as well. So those are really kind of these these paper losses are what's causing the net position to go down year over year, not the outflow of money. I know. Question?
well, I'll let you keep going. I'm not real pleased about this last piece of information, so keep going.
It's just something more we're presenting on. I think this is part of this presentation. I think if you were to trend, you would see these net losses accumulating because of retiree health in the past reporting periods as well. but we can talk about this more. We spent about $5 million in capital assets during the 2018 period. I already mentioned that depreciation expense exceeded that by 1.7, so we did have about 6.7 million in depreciation. We have $40 million net of related debt invested in capital assets, 7.6 restricted for capital, insurance, and other items, and then the big number, the deficit of 88.8 million. That is entirely driven by your other post-retirement benefits obligation of 108.2 million. And this is the same financial picture if you were to go down to the next village, the next town, or whatever municipality. It's that retiree health obligation that erodes the net position. Okay?
I think we should just have that conversation about Medicare for all. Just skip this whole page altogether.
But when you look at the village, and this is more kind of what the bond raters are looking at, is your ability to repay debt. You guys are in tremendous financial shape. So if there's a silver lining, it's that on a current resources basis, you folks have about 5 months worth of cash on hand sitting in your general fund, 40% of your unassigned fund balance of your total expenditures. I have a little trend analysis here on page 13. In terms of your cash outflows or your expenditures, you've pretty much held the line over the last 5 years. I simply took these and divided it by 5, about a 1.5% increase over the last 5 years. That's pretty good. And those increased expenditures have always been offset by increased revenues, which is why your fund balance has accumulated over time. So if it weren't for that nasty health insurance obligation, you guys would be financial heroes. And again, that's not a Village of Ossining issue. I give this presentation to the city of Rye. I'll give it to the village of Dobbs Ferry. I'll give it to the municipalities in upstate. It's just a big issue is the cost of health insurance, and we made a promise to pay people when they retire, and that's the estimation of that liability.
I'm sorry. Just a quick question. This is a professional question.
Yeah.
As you talk about healthcare, these numbers that you said it's like a New York State wide issue, like
because you can't fund it.
Pretty much. Does this problem go beyond New York State? Like, will this be something that?
Well, some states, and I couldn't tell you which ones off the top of my head, permit the establishment of trusts to fund these health insurance costs. Okay. So if you think about your pensions, they're being professionally managed by the state comptroller's office. They're averaging 7, 8, 9%. So for every dollar you put into the retirement system, it's accumulating all this income, which is offsetting the cost of your pension.
Gotcha.
Health insurance, there's no money set aside for it, and that's a New York State thing. There was a law. I think DiNapoli wanted to start up a voluntary trust fund where you could start putting away money and the state would invest it, and I think it's been stalled at the state legislative level. So even if you wanted to be fiscally prudent and put money away from this, you can't, and that's why that's a New York State problem.
All right.
So your hands are tied.
No, actually, we can just call our state legislators and tell them that we would like them to help make this an option.
Yeah, and then you chip away. Well, that would be a good thing. One thing, it's almost like your unrestricted fund balance is too good. And I know we have plans for that money. Obviously, we have some major infrastructure projects coming along. The state comptroller's office likes to see this money set aside in reserves. That's entirely up to you. But I'm just warning you, if OSC were to look at your money, they're going to say, well, why do you have 40% of your unrestricted? You should have your plan ready, and they may recommend you have some reserves. I think given the fact that we just talked about a major unfunded obligation, it's kind of hard to have too much money set aside. Okay, the water fund is equally doing very, very well. Our expenditures are down mostly because during 2017 we transferred a significant amount of money for a capital project. We didn't do that this year, so our expenditures were down. When we exclude that, our expenditures were up. I had it about $206,000, and that was all principal on debt that we now have to pay out of the water fund. So when you look at your water fund expenditures, you've held the line there on expenditures as well, which is really good. So my last bullet point is that your rates seem sufficient to cover your costs at this point. It seems like you have adequate reserves. So on a short-term basis, it's very, very, very positive.
On the water fund, the unrestricted fund balance, there's been some surprising up and downs looking at this 5-year look back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe a lot of that has been for some of the capital purposes that you've been spending. So in this expenditure number, I'm also including transfers to the capital projects fund, and I believe that's what's causing the fluctuations. In the general fund, our only transfer really is to the debt service fund for our debt service payments. So I think that's what's causing the wonky fluctuations. But overall,
Tom, did you want to chime in there? I see you raising your hand, sir.
Yes, specifically in 2017, where the fund balance had dropped, that was the year that we were applying for some grants related to Gordon Avenue and also the new water main along Route 9A, and we had to have a financial plan established, and we didn't have time to issue a bond resolution. So we had set aside, at 1.3 million, I think 1.7 million of fund balance for these projects. The Gordon Avenue water line project is basically complete. The other one is getting ready to be bid, and we've thought of and we've talked of perhaps before the project begins that to substitute a serial bond for the cash that was set aside for this project. But we're heading out to issue a very large serial bond for the construction of the water treatment plant, so I don't really see any purpose to issue a serial bond on the Route 9A project at this time. But it was setting aside the monies in the capital project that caused the big decrease in 2017 in fund balance.
which basically means you were able to finance capital items with existing.
For the people at home, not for us.
You were able to finance your capital projects with existing cash on hand, which is nice, versus having to go out to bond. Okay.
Your funds?
Just some financial stats here on the on page 15. I'll point out the third bullet down. We did do a refunding during 2018, and that refunding was done for future cash flow purposes. Over the period of the bond life, we're going to save about $500,000 in interest, and on a net present value, that would be about $434,000 in today's dollars. So that was a very wise transaction that you folks were able to do. Self-insurance is adequately reserved. Your sewer fund and special purpose funds look good, and I think you folks are aware that the Section 8 housing fund is a little. Requires a transfer from the general fund to keep it afloat. At this point, it's only $67,000. But that's a transfer that's made from the general fund, I believe, to Section 8 just for financial purposes. Page 16 are just my required communications. There's a separate letter that goes through most of these things, but I'll reiterate, we received the full cooperation of everyone we dealt with. We'd like to thank Dale and Tom for their help. As well as Marilyn on the federal single audit side. We thought your records were in good order. The financial health seems good. Adequate reserves, adequate financial processes in place. No significant or unusual transactions. We went through your estimates, considered management bias. We thought your estimates were reasonable. No deficient processes that we report to you as part of our audit. No difficulties encountered, and overall, we thought it was a good audit. and it's not for a lack of effort. We certainly try and alter procedures and try and keep everyone on their toes. But the report's the report. And as always, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them now. But my contact information's here. I'm in Westchester virtually all the time, and I'm always happy to talk about any financial matters as they relate to the audit with the board and management.
Questions or comments?
Can I just, Tom, what's the bond rating right now? The AA2? All right, thank you. I guess it was
Yes,
answered.
we're still AA2. We did not actively seek a bond rating this year because it costs money for a bond rating. And we issued, in 2019, we issued bond anticipation notes that didn't require, and it wasn't cost effective. Last year, we actually had a bond rating for the refunding bond and the serial bond, and they confirmed AA2. And they also did like a surveillance rating, which they do for the benefit of the bondholders, and they confirmed that in 2019 as being AA2 as well. And while I'm here, the audited financial statements, it's always like there are financial statements, but the thing that, is really like personal to us begins on page 3. We're required to write up management discussion and analysis. I always wish that we
Which
could put
volume are we on? This one or this one?
The thicker one, it looks like.
the one that says financial
Financial
report.
report.
I always wish that we could use our letterhead on this, because it's like this one really is ours, where we really think about and explain and analyze what's going on with the village's finances. Pages 3 to 14, I believe. So there's a lot of work done on this after the year is over, and as we get through the nuts and bolts of the audit. And we started looking at the financial statements and working on this. One of the last things that we do on the audit.
I refer to that section as the cliff notes to the financial statements. It's the quick 10 or 12 pages that summarize all the activities. So with that, if there's any questions, again, happy to answer them now, or as your questions arise during the year. I know we speak with Tom and Dale during the year, so we're happy to speak with you as well.
Are these reports available online on our website, or can they be? Well, we've gotten them electronically and in print, but I'm just wondering if the public has easy access to them on the
Right now, they're on the agenda,
Right, but going forward, will they be available on the?
They're going to be
yes,
Treasurer's office page or
on the
finance department?
treasurer's page, there's a section for reports, and we have all the old audit reports going back
Okay, so this
probably
will be
close to
added
10
then.
years, so we'll add this one as well.
Terrific, thank you. I can draw people's attention to page 3.
Those were my prepared remarks.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Brendan.
Okay.
Thank you, Tom.
And it's very, very
I'm
helpful.
Dale and team.
Yes.
Yes, and it's very helpful for us to have this fresh in our mind as we prepare for our budget
Budget.
season. So, and it's a good feeling going into budget season to be given so much positive feedback. We have passed the 9 o'clock mark, and I know we have a couple of more things on the public agenda, and we have executive session. So I'd like to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about dog licensing.
Our village treasurer up to discuss dog licensing.
It
Oh.
just occurred to me, because Tom's stuck here the whole night, but we have other department heads who are in the next item, and if they wanted to leave after that item, if we flipped them.
They wanted to hear about the dogs.
Well, they're welcome to stay for the dogs, but if you guys might not need to hear about the dogs, I think it'd be okay if we did the bid thing next, and then Tom gets stuck here anyway, so. Welcome up, Andy. I'm sorry. is
Okay,
that okay?
I would like to invite.
It just occurred to me while I was looking at
Okay,
this.
well, we will invite, we'll have Tom down for both of this
Yes,
stuff.
he's-
So,
yeah, that's what I'm saying,
so
he's
he's,
stuck here, no
so
matter
he's there
what.
anyway. Okay, so we'll invite, I'm sorry, it took me a minute there. So Tom, we'll put the 2019 capital project HVAC system for the police court on before the dog licensing. We'll just reverse that order.
I'll introduce it and then I'll
We just
turn it over to you. You know
shook
what? I'm
things up
here
here.
anyway.
four
A little
became
bit of
three.
So Andy's here to talk about the HVAC system upgrades at the police court facility that we put out the bid. We've had this in our capital plan for several years. And we had engineers that designed the system and it was put out the bid. We had estimated $250,000 for the upgrade cost, and that's the amount that I had asked for a bond resolution back in February. So we issued the bond anticipation note this month for this project, and the project bid came in at $292,000, which is $42,000 more than the amount that we had borrowed. So, I'm hoping that Andy can answer to your satisfaction, about this project. But in order to proceed, we need additional source of funding for this project. And so my recommendation is to utilize monies from the contingency fund for the additional money needed for this project.
Thanks for having me. So in 2018, we met with Lindstar Engineering, and we asked them, what's a good ballpark budget, and they at the time said 250,000. So at the time, I said to Tom, let's go with 250,000. They designed the system. I think it was for a $24,000 price. It was for construction management and design for like 6 rooftop units and changing out all the HVAC in the whole building, other than the court facility that we changed out kind of in emergency mode 2 years ago, and that was failing. So we're trying to get ahead of it. So they came to me the end of last year and said, we've looked at the design, and something you should know about are there's VAV boxes. So basically it's like motorized damper boxes that have individual thermostats that allow air to be segregated into different rooms. And they said, this is 20 years old. All right, you could probably get away with it and just change the rooftops. But at the time, their recommendation was to change the VAV boxes. And I said, you know what, let's include it in the scope. So it wasn't just that their estimate was 250, it's that their estimate was 250 back in April of 18. It's a year and a half later. And I added to the scope. And the other issue was, not that it's an issue, but we had a pre-walkthrough, we advertised for bid, and only one person walked through with interest, because it's pretty busy out there. The good thing is the person that did bid on it, on the bid date, and did the walkthrough is an Ossining contractor, a big contractor, Carey and Walsh. So Lindstar reviewed their bid, reviewed all the documents, and they did make the recommendation to go for them. Out of that $292,000, there is a $10,000 allowance, and I asked for that allowance to be added. Basically, we could spend it or we don't have to spend it. What it was is that if we're changing, based on logistics, if this is awarded and we change these rooftops out and it's a 0-degree day, I can't have part of that building without heat. So what I wanted was temporary heat so that the police could still work in that section. I think if this is awarded, we can order the equipment because there is lead time, and based on that, it's just figuring out the weather. They're bidding it for a crane to be there for like 2 days, and obviously I wouldn't want to change this equipment out on 0-degree weather. I would say, can we go next week? It looks like it's going to be in the 30s or 40s. So, but I wanted us to be covered in case we needed to rent temporary heat, we'd have it. So
And
it's
that's $10,000 to rent temporary.
I just put it in. I said I requested to put that in as a line item. That if we need to use it, we can use it. But it's there as a placeholder. And if we don't use it, we don't pay.
But that's included in the 292,000.
That's included in the 292,000.
If we move forward with this, will it be a reasonable temperature in the courtroom when we meet on Wednesday nights?
I think it'll be a reasonable temperature tomorrow morning, based on what I just heard.
Okay, great.
And if it's not, then we'll have a switch that we can manually control the thermostat ourselves.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So when are you looking at starting this work?
Well, lead times could be as long as 8 weeks before the equipment. You know, we issue the purchase order, we get we get their insurances. I would think it would probably be beginning of January, February, and it depends on, you know, if the factory's shut down. Like some of this stuff, it's special rooftop units, and a lot of times the suppliers don't just carry this stuff. So I need to find that out. But I didn't want to do this in the middle of the summer because air conditioning is much harder to put temporary air conditioning in than there is for heat. So that's why it was kind of like, let's do this in the fall to winter. And, you know, if the equipment's in faster, then we can do it in phases. But there is 2 days, and maybe we could do half the building, you know, the first crane setup, and then the other half another, you know, a month later, I have to say.
So I guess I have two questions, one for you and then one for you, and then or maybe you can answer it. The V8 boxes that you added to the scope, what is the estimated life that they have left as of now?
Well, they're 20 years old.
Okay, so how
So
long do they typically
the
last?
the estimated life of the equipment is only 15 years.
Okay.
Like when you buy a hot water heater, I think most hot water heaters are like they have a 6-year estimated life, but most hot water heaters last 10 to 15 years. So it's like what the factory will warranty.
And so the first 250 is a bonded project. It's a capital project. So my question is, why couldn't this wait until the 2020 budget? Like why do you need the funds in this year and not just go back and just ask for the whole 292 versus using the contingency?
There's a legal process to go through when you want to issue a serial bond. We need to ask our bond counsel to prepare a bond resolution, and then it gets voted on by the board. And there's usually the permissive referendum period associated with the bond issue, followed by an estoppel period. So it's like a 2-month delay, in addition to the additional time for the bond counsel to write an amended bond resolution. And it's going to cost additional money for his time to write the bond resolution. So I think the big factor is the time delay, because the project won't be able to be awarded and purchase order issued because we're waiting for the bond resolution and such. This allows the project to start right away because we've already passed the permissive referendum and the estoppel period on the original bond resolution.
Yeah.
So this is the most cost-effective way to allow this project to proceed, and you know, without incurring additional costs to issue additional debt.
Right. Thank you.
And I just had a quick question for you. What is if weather permitted, and after we get the units, if it's whatever the time period is for those, the lead time, what is the
construction
construction
period,
period itself?
I have to find out. I don't have that answer. I mean, I would think it's probably 2 weeks because I used to be in the business 25 years ago doing this kind of stuff. Based on the amount of units, they're not changing the ductwork. They're going to be changing the VAV boxes in those areas, but the actual trunk lines and plenums and takeoffs, they're all going to stay the same. I would think it's 2 weeks, but I could find out for sure.
No, I was just curious to see, because I'm assuming, you know, whatever, even the coordination that you may have to have, if weather permitted,
Right.
you know, that's another coordination that the police department may have to adjust to some of the stuff that you guys going to have to be doing while on the construction, sure?
We'll definitely have a Gantt chart of, you know, it's first meeting.
That's part of the project management phase.
Yep.
Okay.
And it's you know, all equipment's kind of crazy, like lead times, and depends on factory. Like, we're gonna kind of run into this lead time situation with the tank THM systems that we're looking to bid within the next 2 months. That's 16 weeks of delays of these special pumps and special sprayer systems for tanks getting onto another project. So it's like the logistics, we're trying to figure this out, when to take things out of service, and you know,
Sure.
that's more stress than this. This is a cakewalk compared to that, so.
Me personally, I hate working with VAB units. The past 2 jobs that I have been involved, it's just a
Yeah, and that's why I
headaches.
want to take the variables out. It's old stuff, and like, now you're expecting the contractor to warranty rooftops. They're getting calls from a certain department that it's not exactly the temperature it should be, and we're going to be paying hourly rates for them to adjust VAV boxes that are 20 years old. Let's just do it right.
Other questions and comments on this?
No, I got my answers. Thank you.
Tom, year to date, how much has been transferred out of the contingency fund? Or with this in mind, how much would have been drawn out of the contingency fund?
I'm actually prepared this time with that question. The contingency account started at $300,000, and we had utilized $20,000 for the for a consultant for the retaining wall on is that Main Street? 80 Main Street.
We know which one.
We'd also used $40,000 for the new uninterrupted power supply system at the police station, and we'd also spent $15,000 for the recreation department wooden signs that were replaced this year. So that's $75,000, and that brought our contingency down to $225,000, and now this would be $45,000. So it looks like we'll be down to $180,000.
Okay, thank you.
That's good. Yeah, we haven't even used a third of it yet, so. Okay, good. So then, if I'm not hearing any concerns about moving this forward, is this another resolution for next week?
Tom would have the finance resolution, and we can have the resolution with regard to accepting the bid.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, on to dog licensing.
Yes, this is actually a story that began back in 2011.
Story time.
Oh my God! When we start with the story,
It goes very quickly. It jumps from 2011 to 2019 very quickly. We stopped receiving dog license revenues. So at the time, I asked the clerk about that, and she said that it was, now a town clerk function, not issuing dog licenses as a village clerk function. And we learned more about this this year when Stuart looked into the matter. It turned out in 2011, the New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets got out of the dog license business, and they passed some type of a regulation that said that all dog licenses in the state would be issued by the town clerk. But we didn't find out until this year that I guess the regulations said that in Westchester County and Suffolk County, I believe, those would still be a village clerk function unless the village clerk gave up that function. So that's part of the issue that we're dealing with. So my deputy has done a lot of calculations looking at all the dog licenses that have been issued by the clerk's office. From 2011 through August 2019, dog licenses issued to village residents totaled $29,503, and in addition, there was $10,308 of dog licenses that were issued to non-village residents in the 10 outside area. So that was, starting with the $29,503, that's the total amount of revenues that could have been a village revenue if it was still accounted for as a village clerk revenue. In this process, we also found that because we never adjusted our fee schedule. Our fee schedule still says that spayed and neuter dogs, dog license would be $10, and the unspayed and non-neutered would be $18. And meanwhile, the town board has increased the dog fees by $5 to $15 and $23 for the years.
I think 2017, Tom, was when.
Yeah, 2017, 18, and now 19. From our perspective, because the village never modified our fee schedule, village residents were overcharged $4,835. So in discussing this matter with the town, part of the process would be that dog owners would receive a reduction in their dog license fee on a going forward basis to make them whole for the amounts that that they have overpaid. It's basically $5 per license, and there was actually 218 village dog owner customers, so that's on average $22, which would be, and we're talking about 2 years or 3 years or maybe 1 year for some of the dogs. Depending upon the amount at $5 that they overpaid for however many years, that would be credited on their dog licenses going forward. Also, another factor was that the town clerk, on the town budget, the town clerk has specialized dog licensing software, which costs money. I believe it's the cost per year is now in 2018, it's $2,020 per year. It ranged back down to $1,350 as of 2011. So when we calculate the village clerk IMA services that we receive from the town, the percentage of town expenses that gets allocated is 65% gets charged to the village. So the town believes, and it's an argument that I have to admit that, if the village were to continue to collect dog licenses, that we would need the software as well. So them paying what they've paid, which is $14,540 for years 2011 to 2019, the village share would be 65%, which is $9,451, and that would also be deducted from the village dog license revenues, and so we're down to $15,217. That is a net amount that would be due to the village for this matter, and then the question is going forward whether or not the village wishes to give up this dog license issue and let the town clerk issue the dog licenses, and that way we don't have to buy the software. It's not a significant amount to our budget on an annual basis. The revenues were, it was for 2018, it was $5,248 in village revenues, less the amount that was over collected. It was about $1,800. So when you look at the amount of revenues that we had to earn and offset it against the expense of buying the additional software so that we could issue our village dog licenses, and also all of our dog license database is in the town database, and so there would be a fee to extract that data as well, which the company estimated would be $4,000 if they wanted the data extracted. So I think that this may have been discussed already, but I think the general feeling was that maybe the town clerk should issue all dog licenses And it won't be a village function at all, just like it really hasn't been since
Yep.
2010.
I don't usually jump in first, but I'm going to this time. I don't see a strong reason why the village would want to issue dog licenses. I think that I could generally be supportive of the village taking ourselves out of the dog licensing business officially, and it's too bad that it wasn't done in 2011 when the state changed their policy, because we wouldn't be having this conversation and the accounting wouldn't have been an issue for the last 9 years. But I do have a couple of questions. First of all, for the 2 years that we've had a lower fee on the village books than the town, village residents who have dogs who've been getting dog licenses has been officially overcharged $5 per year, and that totals the $4,835. What's proposed here is that if anybody comes in from the village when they apply for their next dog license, that they would be given a credit for the $5 or $10. That's not good enough, as far as I'm concerned. If somebody watches this meeting and they want to come to the clerk's office tomorrow and say, you took $10 from me over the last 2 years that you weren't entitled to, give me $10, they need to do that. Where, like, that revenue is accounted for.
So the idea was, so I think that if somebody came forward and they can prove that they paid or whatever, and that wouldn't necessarily be an issue. The issue was there was really no cost-effective way to alert everybody or send them their money back. So I think that the idea is that we want to, we want to refund to the fullest extent that's reasonably possible, but doing the outreach to people was
Okay.
cost per. But if somebody comes in and they want their money, they don't want it. So the credit would be a way to trigger that, like you would get it. So say you didn't watch the meeting and you didn't go online and you didn't read something, then you would automatically get it no matter what. So the onus wouldn't be on you to
Right.
know. So that part of it's good. I think that if we can adjust it so that if we push it out and people, we'd have to talk about logistically, administratively what that means, but I understand your point. The other, because the other thing that was considered was, trying to find everybody, right? It was.
I don't think it's worth the administrative nightmare to give
Right.
people $5 or $10. But they did overpay the $5 or $10
Right.
unknowingly. So they may not have a dog anymore. They may not want to license their dog
Right.
next year, whatever. So they were overcharged. But I also really like that if these are people who regularly get their dog license, as they should, then they will show up. They live in the village, so then the clerk's office will then look at the record and say, okay, we mistakenly overcharged you for the last 2 years. Your fee this year is actually $5 less or $10 less
Right.
than you were anticipating. That's great. That they will proactively offer that to anybody who's a village resident. They'll do the research when somebody shows up here and then take it off
I think
automatically
we
from their bill.
probably could, I think we could probably also try to get something out there that if you had a dog during this period and you no longer had a dog and you'd like a refund, that,
You're entitled to it. Come on into the
you're entitled to come in. I think there's probably a way to do it. And that way we're covered all ways and, everybody, most people probably, well, I don't know who still has a dog or who moved or, it's hard to tell. But I think that in that way we make a best faith effort to
Cover all
do
the
as
bases,
much, return on overcharge as
Excellent.
possible.
Then-
So we could talk about how I'll follow up with tomorrow on how we can do that.
Then my other question is related to this software, the BAS software, so the BAS software that the village allocation is being stated as $9,451 that we should have paid over 9 years, but we weren't being charged the 65% of that. Is that software exclusively for, it's not exclusively for dog licenses, it's used for a number of things in the clerk's office, correct? Or am I mistaken? Please help me understand.
I think now it includes marriage licenses. It includes the cash receipt system, but I think the biggest component of what they pay is for the dog licenses.
The cash receipts is partially village, or is it all village things?
Well, the village has our own software in the clerk's office that's just cash for receipts.
Oh, so the cash receipts that are in the BAS have nothing to do with the village, that are part of the BAS system, that's the town cash receipts?
This amount here, you know, there's two software systems there, both by BAS. The village has one very small system that's just cash receipts. You know, like, for instance, selling the parking lot tags to residents. You know, it's accounted for in their cash receipt system. The town has their own accounting system from BAS, which is a larger system that includes cash receipts transactions taken in by the town clerk, the dog licenses, and I believe marriage licenses. And I think marriage licenses are done electronically now.
And the marriage licenses, that's a town clerk function, right?
Yes.
So of this $14,540, you're telling me that the bulk of that is being incurred because of dog licenses, but the rest of it, that it's the marriage licenses and the cash receipts, has nothing to do with the village?
Well, the town cash receipt system was used to account for the village dog licenses that were sold as a town revenue.
Are there cash receipts for other things that the town has, or is it just dogs? I mean, I know we have a lot of
I
permits
know that
and
the
stuff.
town clerk sells conservation licenses like hunting and fishing. They issue marriage licenses.
The reason I'm asking is the 65%, that's a percent that is applied to other things in the IMA, or is it just, it's because it's never been applied to the BAS fees
It's
before.
never been included in the IMA calculation because since 2011, it's been perceived as a town clerk function only, so it wasn't included in the calculation.
Mistakenly, yeah.
Whereas salaries, which is the largest component of the IMA, that's allocated 65% to the village because their time study was that the amount of time that they spend on village activities is 65% of their day.
I believe it. I seem to recall when we had our previous conversation that while we weren't paying 65% of this fee, were we paying a flat fee, for some reason $320, and I'm not looking at my notes from that meeting, were we paying a flat fee each year for this service, for the software? Wasn't there, no? What am I imagining?
I don't think it's part of the IMA calculation. The village was, you know, the village paid our own fee, I thought, because we have a village clerk budget in our village budget. I thought that we were paying BAS directly as a village expense. In fact, I know that we were, because I looked them up on our village accounting system.
You mean for our own separate account?
Yes.
Nothing to do with this?
Correct.
Okay. Does anybody else have questions or comments?
So you said that we basically would get like $29,000 in revenue if we were to go recoup some of our money. Did I understand you?
That's the amount of dog licenses that were issued to village residents from 2011 through August 2019.
And then if we agreed to this $94,000 for the software cost that I don't believe was $9,400 that was included in the software cost that may or may not have been in the IMA, that would bring us down to roughly.
I know that the village did not pay for the town BAS software in the IMA calculation.
So the way that the IMA is written is that anything that they do, they charge us 65% of all their expenses. Is that?
No, some expenses in that office are directly paid by the village. Some of them are paid directly by the town and not charged back. And I know that a few years ago, you know, we decided that, for instance, the legal notices were specific to either the town or the village, and that the town or the village would pay their own legal expenses and not throw that in the IMA calculation, because that just didn't make sense. And that was something that was specific, and it could be, you know, easily processed as either a town or a village expense. Upstairs in our office, my deputy, you know, does the IMA budget, and she does the IMA reconciliation at the end of the year, and, you know, she's looking at all town expenses, and we're doing that calculation and sharing only applicable expenses, 65-35.
So how did you get down to like 15, like we would, after expenses, what did you say we would get, like 15?
$15,217. That was starting with a $29,503 in
Okay.
total revenues, deducting the $4,835 that was overpaid by village residents, and that would be held by the town and credited back to the residents, because we felt that if the town was going to continue to issue dog licenses, we don't want to, you know, in the village, we don't want to be, you know, having to specifically refund this money back, that, you know, they had offered to offset it against future dog licenses, you know, and now we've discussed the option of, you know, if somebody wants their money sooner rather than waiting for the next time. So it was 29,503 less the 4835 that's being held to refund to the village residents, and then deduct the 9,451 being the 65% of the BAS software costs, and that comes up with a net of 15,217.
So I guess I'm trying to understand the 48 that's being set aside. Why are we paying for that? Like, why?
We're not paying for that. You know, the total revenue, the 29,503 is at the town fee schedule. So for the past, you know, close to 3 years, 17, 18, and 19 to date, they were collecting an additional $5 per license. So,
We
you
never
know,
received the revenue because they were receiving the revenue, so they got that money, but they got it from village residents who theoretically should have been, we didn't change our fee schedule. So it's not like we paid any money, it's just that that would be what they need to refund them to make them whole based if they were implementing it, they should have charged them a village fee separate from a town fee.
Because it's not our money.
Yeah.
It's the dog owner's money.
Got you.
Yeah,
So we want to
yeah,
get the
so
money
it's-
back to the dog owners.
Yeah, it's
So
none of
it's
it's
just
our-
an accounting on
yeah.
where it sits until it gets to the dog owners.
My last question is, when is the town going to cut the check for the rest of the revenue?
As soon as we agree to give them the
I think
responsibility.
that this was part of the process, was to, you know, have the town and the village agree to this resolution of the matter, and if the village is going to, you know, give up the, you know, the process to issue dog licenses as a village function, I think that, I don't know, it's, it could be part of the reconciliation at the end of the year when we do the true-up of the clerk expenses. You know, maybe we could start adjusting, you know, our payments for the months of October, November, December, which I believe we pay that quarterly anyway. So there would only be one more payment to the town, and that's sort of also part of getting ready to do the true-up at year end.
I am in total support of allowing the town to continue managing our dogs when it comes to licensing them. I feel good that we're going to try to find a feasible plan to outreach to those who have been overcharged when it comes to village residents. I don't want to beat a dead horse, so we don't have to, I don't necessarily get who or how the determination was made as to the 65% for the software and how that math is used. But that could just be an education for me, once again, to kind of just, not at this time, just learn more about the whole IMA, particularly with the Office of the Clerk. and what's included and what's not, and what's at that rate and what's not. And that I'll just do on my own later with Tom or Karen or
Well, very simply, that was, part of the IMA committee back in, I want to say 2009 or 2010, when we started, recosting and the first ones we did was finance IMA and clerk IMA because they were only increasing by cost of living and not keeping track of the true expenses. So those two, since they were kind of offsetting, we started reworking those IMAs, and we have a updated IMA agreement for both the clerk and the finance department and IT, where we do this estimated budget based on salaries and estimated expenses, and then at the end of the year, there's a true-up, and the IMA committee had looked at and agreed with the 65-35% allocation on the clerk's IMA.
Mayor, can I just ask one question?
Please.
Tom, do we have any way to know what the specific cost of the dog license module is as compared to the entire software maintenance agreement? Because I think we're figuring the 65% based on the entire software. Can we tease out what the module for the dog license is?
I had gone to the BAS website and I looked at what they were offering.
I thought we did that, or we looked into that.
I know I went upstairs and I talked to the people in the supervisor's office because they had already looked at this in order to understand better.
I think it was an issue that
And-
they don't, that in the, if I remember correctly, because I do think we raised this, that's not how they really break it, that.
I'm
on
a-
the individual software project.
Yeah,
My only
that-
reason for asking the question is we're effectively, if the board is in agreement, they'd be paying 65% of certain costs that they actually don't do anything with. That's
Right.
the only reason I'm raising that point.
But the module
That was the point I was
is
trying to
the-
make.
but I
Thank
don't
you
know
for
that
stating
the-
it more
the-
clearly, apparently.
But I think that we did, when we sat down and talked about this, and Victoria, I think you were in that meeting
I was
when we
there.
talked we spoke about specifically what the module was, and Marianne tried to get that price, but the module, the way it comes is the way, the package is a package.
It
so
does
you
look,
can't-
it does look like, from what I printed out, that it was one package that included.
So it's like you really can't, that's the package you'd have to buy no matter what, regardless of whether you were doing dog license and other things or just dog license. That was the, yeah.
Because
Except that-
because these are typical town clerk functions.
Right.
Right, and the thing is, we have our own
Yeah, we
software
duplicate.
package for all of our village stuff. We are, because we shouldn't be in the dog license business at all. So next year, we won't be duplicating.
But we do know it would cost us $4,000 to convert, to
be
do
in the
it on
dog
our
license
own.
business,
So
yes.
maybe that's
That's the answer.
Maybe there's your answer.
Oh, the thing is, nobody wants the village to be in the dog license business.
No.
The problem is, nobody told us to get out of it properly, legally,
And
on
in
paper.
that regard, just two things. To actually turn it over to the town merely requires a resolution.
Right.
However, you would have to revise at some point your local law, because you do have a whole section on licensing in there. You'd have to effectively, repeal that. But in terms of turning it over to the town, state law is clear, it only requires a resolution.
And we also need to update the fee
The
schedule.
fee schedule, I was gonna.
Well, you'd have to delete it.
We'd get rid of that. in the-
What about if
you
we
know,
could
fee
just,
schedule.
because a lot of people it's a lot of residents within the village itself may go to that section. Why can't we just put a big note on it and say, see town section, whatever the section of the fee schedule, and the town
Absolutely.
directed it to them until they get used to it
Sure.
enough.
That can be done.
Instead of just deleting
And
it,
just-
take
instead of
the
just
dollar
deleting it.
amount and say,
Yeah,
this
just
is
see.
how a town functions, see the town
Exactly,
fee
see the
schedule.
town fee schedule. I mean, to me, well,
There's no
because a
reason
lot
to
of people may not know that people know that they go to the town or to the town's clerk to get a license, but they may
Yeah,
not know that, they'll have to look at a different fee schedule because they don't live in a town, they live in a village.
Well, look, it hasn't appeared to be an issue really, though, because people
I'm
go.
just saying, I don't know.
But I'm just saying, people go, they sign it, the document that they get right now, it's
It's an
clearly from the
application,
town, and they know, and they pay whatever fee, and no, we haven't had any customer, dog owner come in and question
Sure.
so it's really been
Maybe we
something
just do it
that's,
for this year.
yeah.
Right. And it would have come to our attention sooner if anybody looked at the fee schedule, because they
Right.
would ask the same question that I did, which is, why are you overcharging our village residents
Right,
with this town form?
but nobody, so,
Yeah. But that happened 2009, sure. No, 2011, you said?
2011
That's
was
when
when
it
the.
changed.
But we didn't change our fees
The
until
fee didn't change
2017.
until
Right.
2
The
years
town
ago.
changed their
So
fee.
that's only, the fee difference has only been for 2 years.
Sure. No, I understand.
Okay, so it sounds like we're ready to move forward with whatever the steps are. I guess initially it's a resolution to have this become a town function, then it's an updating of the code to
That's
delete
exactly-
this essentially, and an updating of the fee schedule.
Right, and then.
And then we wa-
Board determination in terms of what you want to do in terms of with the town and.
Where will it state that the village residents will be reimbursed either as a credit in their next dog license, or they can come in?
So I think
I don't know that that would be in a resolution, but I want it to
I
be in
think we
writing.
need to talk to the clerk's office and also determine that if somebody came in, because I think we already discussed this, and then we can put information on the website. Once we get the language down, we could put it in a web list. We can, maybe keep like some little icon posted, like, our little,
The village dog.
yeah, we'll, yeah, so I think there's a way
Village dog.
we could, talk that up and get the information out. And then I just want to make sure administratively that whatever we're saying, actually can be done.
Yes, absolutely. So let's make sure that that's in place before we pass the resolution. Okay. All right.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks,
Tom.
Tom.
Is there, before we adjourn, is there any other things that we're forgetting about that aren't on here? Or can we adjourn to exec?
We can adjourn to exec at this time.
Okay, so we need to adjourn to executive session for a number of reasons. I don't want to leave any out. Do we have a motion to adjourn to executive session for matters of personnel related to specific persons? What's the
Real property?
real property? Oh, it is? Oh, and collective bargaining.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned to executive session. We'll see you next week at the legislative session at the Birdsall Fagan Police Court Facility. This meeting is adjourned.